The Roland Jupiter 8 is an exciting, iconic synthesizer from 1981, also known as the JP8. There is some conflicting info about whether or not the Jupiter 8 was launched in 1981 or 1982, but let's say 1981 to be safe. Today I want to share with you insights from a design perspective, and I need to be clear that we're not experts in things like the history, technology, or the mechanics. So we're not going to critique on even the sound quality. It's more about how this instrument is visually. Of course, the craftsmanship of the instrument is important. And from a design perspective, we do take that into consideration because it does have aesthetic influences. Before we go any further, I'd like to take us back to the early 80s, a time when synthesizers made great insteps into music. Duran Duran, for example, used the Jupiter 8 on many of their most iconic early songs. It was considered powerful and portable, even though it's no small instrument, and relatively heavy. But we have to remember that prior to this, a lot of digital sounds in the 70s came out of big, heavy boxes with lots of loose wire connections. So this really was quite an elegant instrument at that time, and certainly one that looked great on stage. I do remember seeing Nick Rhodes with the Jupiter 8 in concert. A cool sight indeed. The Jupiter name had already been used by Roland in prior synthesizers, but the 8 really was their flagship and crowning achievement. It has an 8-note polyphony keyboard, which was considered very good at the time, though unfortunately it just missed out on MIDI technology. Aftermarket MIDI retro kits were available, and it's quite common to find Jupiter 8s with such modifications. The synthesizer in this review, however, is completely original and doesn't have any modifications. We are big fans of things in absolute original condition, and this is a great example of that, and also in exceptional condition since there is barely a mark on it, so it feels like new. In terms of price and availability, there's a lot of varying information on what they cost back in the day. Some say they were US $5,000 and in the UK £4,000, which really was an exceptional at the time. They were also quite hard to find, even when new, because everyone wanted one, and with only 3,000 units said to have been produced. The Jupiter 8 is very rare, and those who own them don't like to part with them. We can talk more about what they may really be worth a bit later. So let's get stuck into the design of this fascinating instrument. As a first impression, it's definitely analog, which you can see from all the sliders, knobs, switches, and buttons. It is surprisingly colorful with all the colors of the rainbow. When you think about the early 80s with neon lights and fluorescent colors, the Jupiter 8's colorful expression dates it into that period rather well. These colors contrast nicely against the dark metal body. In fact, there's a lot of metal, and this gives it a very industrial but still beautiful feeling. It's exciting and visually enticing everyone to play and experiment. Looking around this instrument, it's hard to deny that it is very well built because there is so much metal. We particularly like those end caps, which consist of a simple aluminum plate. The plate is brushed raw and contrasts strongly against the dark gray. It's so simple and cool and feels very nice to touch. Though a little edgy, perhaps, it's important to recognize that the gray color is relatively warm, so when complemented by the dominant use of orange graphics, there is a real sense of invitation. The main panel is obviously dominated by sliders, switches, and buttons, but doesn't look crowded as there is good structure throughout. We've talked about the colorfulness and how they add to excitement with an 80s vibe, but they also create a sense of friendliness, which is quite important because all those controllers, though normal at the time, can look a little intimidating today. All right, let's keep going. The left panel looks a little crowded in our opinion, and those exposed screws that tend to rust, they probably could have been avoided with better design detailing. Imagine how vastly ahead of its time the Jupiter 8 would have looked without them. There is an angle on the rear panel that helps to slenderize the overall bulkiness. Roland is printed in big orange graphics on the rear, and there's also a continuous row of air vents across the top, which adds seriousness with the impression that this is going to heat up hot when in action. So, you have been warned, watch out for smoke. All levers, switches, buttons, and LED lights have a basic mechanical feel and look as if straight out of an airplane's cockpit. Very cool. One very nice detail that we like a lot is the central display area that is just a simple piece of clear acrylic with beveled edges, and it's attached with 4 hexagonal chrome-plated bolts. A rather exquisite touch amongst a sea of controllers. Beautiful, don't you think? In regards to craftsmanship, there is a lot of metal in this instrument, with the main panel being just a single sheet, folded with an aerodynamic angle at the rear. Neat. Simple. Unsurprisingly, this synth is heavy with everything being industrial grade. Impressive then and still impressive now. Even the paint and graphics are high quality, well applied, and easy to read. Having said that, these instruments were so good that they were literally used to death. Ouch. Most of them are full of scuffs, dints, and scratches, maybe even some old sweat and blood. Ugh. Yucky. It's extremely difficult to find one as pristine as this one. However, and fortunately, you can get replacement buttons, and even those end plates are still available aftermarket if you don't mind. As mentioned previously, there is a lot happening in terms of controls, but it's not overcrowded. It is designed for efficient sound manipulation with everything within reach, enticing you to explore. All controllers feel smooth, substantial, and supportive. The screen is possibly a little small in our opinion. Only numerals? Well, you do have to remember that it's an analog synthesizer from the dawn of the 80s, and that was considered sufficient, maybe even lucky. Something we particularly like is the big orange power button. This must be one of the largest power buttons we've seen, and we love that it lights up. Yeah, nice. Okay. In terms of collectability and desirability, the Jupiter 8 is up there at the top of most keyboardists' wish lists. Oh yes, it is, because this is a holy grail when it comes to synthesizers. They are super cool, still usable, rare, and expensive. Original examples without modifications are rare, and even more rare are ones still in immaculate condition. It's hard to speculate on their true value, with sellers expecting US $35,000 upwards for ones in nice condition. Whoa, we don't know if people are paying that, but certainly I would imagine that you would not spend less than $20,000 for a sound example. The instruction manuals themselves are even harder to come by, and can be worth a few $100s in themselves for even a rough one. Are you kidding me? No way. The Jupiter 8 is really something to cherish if you're a lucky owner. If you're trying to acquire one, you need to be patient, like a good Jedi, and perhaps willing to compromise with things like blood, sweat, and modifications. We love the design because it still looks fresh. I mean really, really fresh, and feels like a proper electronic machine with a 70s-80s vibe. This particular Jupiter 8 is featured at the Wolf Design Review website, where it was first reviewed in March 2022, virtually 40 years after its launch. It scored an 8.3, which is very high because not many things score over 8. Over there, those guys are tough with their scoring, but we still love them and their good work is certainly appreciated. The Jupiter 8 is just a really beautiful and iconic instrument that is well worth checking out if you ever come across one, and certainly one that's still appreciating in value. Unbelievable. That's probably all we need to say today about this amazing synthesizer. Feel free to add more insights in the comments section. This particular Jupiter may even be needing a new home in the near future if you know anyone keen on a mint original example. Sorry for my monotone and dreary, confused voice. We are still learning how to work and coexist with AI. Ha 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 ha. Maybe need to improve the laugh?